Chapter 1. He was too young, which meant he was suitable. Every summer she chose. They said for service at court. In reality, for knights. He was 16. The others were unlucky. The palace became hot again. Heavy air slid along the curtains, billowed the candles, stuck to skin. Summer within these walls was not about holidays. Summer was about selection. Every year in July, carts arrived in the back courtyard. Boys, all no older than 18, from respectable families, but not too noble. Beautiful, slender, with proper hands and proper fear in their eyes. They said, for service. They said, at court. They said, if lucky, he'll remain. In reality, everyone knew. If he remained, it meant he was chosen. And if chosen, by morning, he no longer smiled. Never. Inside, behind marble columns, she sat. In black, with loose hair, with a fan that didn't hide but emphasized, with rings that gleamed on her fingers, as if they were power itself. She didn't look at faces, at the movement of necks, at the angle of cheekbones, at how each of them lowered their gaze, or didn't lower it. This one, she said, not loudly, as if choosing wine. He stood at the end in a dusty shirt, with wrists that still bore rope marks. They were brought tied up. He wasn't the most beautiful, but in his body was something unformed, something that could be broken or raised. How old? She asked, not looking. 16, he answered, and didn't flinch, and didn't smile, and didn't look away. She raised her eyes, for the first time, looked directly. There was no challenge in him, but no fear either, only a question asked by his body. What will you do with me? Keep him, she said, and walked away. The others remained in the sun, until evening, until pain, until refusal, and he passed under the arch, following her, following the shadow, which now became his only home. At night he was washed, twice, not for cleanliness, for ritual. In the morning he woke in a room without windows, without mirrors, without exit. On the table, bread, water, and a letter. You have been chosen. Service begins with silence, everything else later. He didn't open a window. He simply lay down and waited, because he understood. Now he belonged not to himself, but to her. And the strangest thing in this was not punishment, but peace. Chapter 2. He was brought in a silk shirt, without weapons. He didn't resist, but didn't bow either, looked straight ahead, as if he knew why he was here, and knew he wouldn't leave. On the second evening he was brought to her, not as a warrior, not as a page, as a gift. 2 eunuchs, in gloves, slowly, almost carefully, as if they led not a boy, but a relic. He wore a new shirt, thin, white. Silk slid over his shoulders like water, not a single stain, not a single seam, everything smooth, everything exposed. On his belt, nothing. No knife, no pouch, no masculine sign. He entered the hall naked inside, and she was already waiting. Sitting on a dais, nearby, wine, fruits, a small bowl with aromatic oils, light fell only on her. He stood in semi-darkness. Name? She asked. Voice soft, but not tender. So speak those who don't ask, but choose. Elio, he said, and didn't look away. She raised her chin, not from surprise, from assessment. "Who is your father?" "I don't know." "Who is your mother?" "I no longer remember." Silence. Long. She examined him, like a sculptor, stone, like a woman, wine she hadn't tasted. He stood straight, without tension, without fear, and suddenly stepped forward, one step closer, not to the throne, to her. The servants flinched, but she didn't. She simply tilted her head to the side. "Why don't you ask why you're here?" He looked, deeply, evenly. "Because I already know." These words weren't impudence. This was a statement. He wasn't stupid. He was too young to lie. She slowly stood, came closer, ran her finger along the collar of his shirt. The fabric cooled the skin. The skin didn't tremble. He didn't kiss her hand, didn't lower his head. He simply was. "Good," she said. "Let's begin with silence." She walked past. He remained, stood in the middle of the hall, alone, in white, in chosen. He wasn't led back. He wasn't shown the way, because now there was one path, and it led, not outward, but inside her. Chapter 3. She used to say, first food, then flesh, then monastery. So it was with each. They trembled, obeyed, disappeared. But this one ate slowly, slept long, looked longer than all. This was her order, created over years. To break it meant to lose control. First, food, so the body wouldn't confuse hunger with desire, so the trembling would disappear, so they wouldn't beg, so they wouldn't smell of fear. After, flesh, when the mouth doesn't ask for bread, it asks for a kiss. When hands are no longer clenched in fists, they're ready to lie on thighs. Only then, not earlier. And then, monastery, where walls don't speak, where men forget women, where flesh is foreign and God is blind. Everyone knew this path, even if no one voiced it. Elio knew, but didn't play by the rules. He ate differently, as if he had time, as if he chose what was worth trying and what wasn't. Took bread with 2 fingers, didn't swallow, chewed slowly, looked not at the food, looked at her. The servant who served him a goblet said, "He eats like an old man." But she knew, old men eat so as not to die. He ate to show he wasn't afraid. She watched from afar, through a screen, through translucent fabric, quietly, for a long time. He felt the gaze, but didn't turn away, simply continued eating, as if the entire ritual was already part of the game, which he knew no worse than she. At night, silence. Usually the new ones don't sleep. They dream of the monastery, servants, blood on sheets, shame. But he slept, on his back, face to the ceiling. Chest, calm, hands at his sides. She entered the room, without sound, feet bare, dress long, dark, sat on the edge of the bed. He didn't wake, but after a couple of seconds, turned to her, in sleep, forehead in her direction. Eyelashes trembled, and again, stillness. The servant said, "He's too calm." She answered, "He's simply waiting." And this was more frightening than pleading, worse than submission, because if a boy doesn't ask, he intends to stay. On the third day she ordered his linen changed, softer, cleaner, to place the bed closer to her chambers. On the fourth, brought a goblet of wine, herself. He took it, but didn't drink. Why? She asked. He looked at her, directly, eyes without challenge, voice even. I want to remember everything that will be. She was silent, took a step back, changed the goblet for a cold look, but inside, for the first time in a long while, felt herself noticed. He didn't touch her, but touched her scheme. And by this became more dangerous than those who begged, trembled, or tried to flee, because he had already entered, without body, through silence, through pause, through that which no longer belonged only to her. Chapter 4. She ordered him washed every night, personally. The servants didn't understand. He didn't argue. But one time, when she entered, he was already waiting, naked, in her place, in her chair. The first night he washed with the help of servants, the second with one assistant. On the third, she said, "No one else, only me." This sounded calm, as if there was nothing strange, as if every youth passed through her hands before touching her body. The servants lowered their eyes. No one objected, but inside, no one understood. He wasn't dirty or weak. He didn't ask for help. He didn't faint from the heat. He simply accepted, without gratitude, without resistance, as if he knew this was part of something bigger, as if she needed it more than he did. First night. She entered the bathhouse. Warmth, steam, light, only from candles. He stood waist-deep in water, chest clean, skin even, eyes closed. She went behind his back, poured water into a bowl, washed his shoulders, silently. He didn't flinch. He didn't look back. Only said, "Warm. Thank you." Voice low, not youthful. Calm. Too calm for 16 years. On the fourth night, he didn't come. She entered and didn't see him by the water. The servants said, "We don't know where he is." She didn't answer, went up to her chambers, opened the doors, and stopped. He was sitting, in her chair, naked, calm, as if it was his room. He didn't jump up, didn't cover himself, didn't make excuses. He said, "I thought you were tired. I can wait here." She didn't move, simply looked. Her chair, her shadows, her candles, and he, in the center of everything, without clothes, but not vulnerable. He looked directly, at her face, without expectation, without shame. And in this moment she understood. He had already crossed the line. He was not a servant, not a boy, not a body, but a mirror. Because everything she did to others, he did to her, silently, evenly, confidently. She approached, not quickly, placed her palm on the armrest, next to his hand. "You know this isn't your place. Then why am I here?" He didn't smile. He didn't threaten. He simply was, as if he had always sat here. And the chair didn't protest. It accepted his back, his thighs, his gaze, and she suddenly understood. If she stepped away now, if she left, he would remain and become one she could no longer erase. Chapter 5. He said, "You choose, and I remain. This wasn't a challenge. This was a verdict. He didn't ask, didn't beg. He simply remained, first in the room, then in the body. At dawn she woke because the air in the room had become different. Heavy, warm, unobtrusive, but filled. He was there, by the window, without shoes, in a white shirt. The same one in which he was once chosen. In his hand, a clay bowl with water. He drank slowly, looking into the garden. Did he see that she had awakened? Most likely, yes. But he didn't turn around, didn't speak. He wasn't a guest, wasn't a silent lover. He was part of the room. She lay on her side, covered by a thin sheet, and watched, several minutes, without words, without movements. Then got up, put on a robe, came closer. He set down the bowl and turned, calmly, confidently, not with arrogance, but with right. "You didn't leave," she said. "No," he answered. "Why?" "Because I remained." His voice was low, calm. He didn't make excuses, didn't seek reaction. He simply said how it was. "It's not for you to decide," she whispered. He looked into her eyes. "No, but you always choose, and I simply decided." And again, silence, the kind in which rules crumble, not with screaming, but with gazes. He didn't leave the room that day, nor the next. He wasn't led away. He wasn't sought. He became background, a shadow that doesn't disappear in light. He was in the corridor when she passed, in the garden when she read, in the room when she fell asleep, nearby, without sound, without permission. He didn't ask if he could lie beside her. He simply lay down, sometimes not touching, sometimes touching only with breath. Once she opened her eyes at night, and he lay facing her, not sleeping, looking, calmly, as if counting her eyelashes. "Do you want something?" she asked. He answered, "No." "Then what are you waiting for?" He answered, "For when you too stop choosing." And this wasn't a challenge, this was a verdict, because that same evening she didn't send him away. She removed the ring from her finger, touched his shoulder, and said nothing when he entered her, not as a guest, not as a servant, as a man who remained and took what was his. And in the morning he didn't leave. He again stood by the window, with a cup, naked from the waist up. Quiet. The same. Only now, already inseparable. Chapter 6. She said, "You're not for love, you're for pain." He smiled. He agreed. But when she touched, it wasn't his skin that trembled, but hers. She didn't speak these words often, almost never, but that night she said them, quietly, in his ear, slowly. "You're not for love, you're for pain." He didn't object, didn't take offense, didn't ask again. He simply smiled, that same smile in which was neither naivety nor hope, only understanding, as if he heard what he had long known. That night she was cruel, so it seemed to her. She scratched, squeezed, commanded, left marks, rose above him, threw back her head, made him be silent. He obeyed, was silent, didn't look away. But with each of her attempts to be harsh, the trembling passed to her. Not his body vibrated from tension, but her fingers. She leaned toward him, wanting to break, and suddenly felt herself cracking at the seam because he didn't resist and didn't lose himself. He was simply stronger in silence than she, in screaming. "Tell me, does it hurt?" she asked, after another bite, after she ran her nails across his chest, leaving red stripes. He looked, calmly. "No." "Are you afraid?" "No." "Then what do you feel?" He was silent, ran his finger along her cheek, carefully, as if he knew she was about to fall apart. "I feel how you try to hide, in me, through pain, but this doesn't work." She wanted to push him away, but couldn't, because his hand remained on her neck, not with force, with softness, as if he held not a queen, but a wounded girl whom everyone forgot to comfort. She again wanted to say, "You are for pain," but her tongue wouldn't turn, because now, every time she entered him with power, he in response entered her with clarity, with silence, with acceptance. And that night she didn't win. She grew tired. She lay on him, not as on a body, as on a shoulder. And for the first time in many years, fell asleep on someone's chest. And not alone among silks and power. And it didn't hurt. This frightened her most of all. He didn't go to the monastery. He opened the doors of her bedroom. In front of the guards, in front of her husband, he entered. He remained, and no one stopped him, because everyone feared her, but he didn't. That very date arrived, 7th week, threshold, term, last night. Precisely at this time, by tradition, she sent the chosen one to the monastery, officially for training, unofficially into exile, without letters, without a way back. No one returned, never. So it always was, and everyone knew. Servants prepared horses. A monk from the neighboring abbey was already waiting at the gates. He was handed clothing, gray, without a belt, a sign of humility. He took it, looked, and placed it on the bed. Didn't say no, didn't say yes. He simply walked past, silently, toward the stairs. Toward her chambers. In the courtyard this was noticed. The guard froze. Servants stepped back. One ran for the advisor, another for the king, but no one dared block the path, because in his back was no doubt, only decision. He walked slowly, but his step was firm. Each sound of heels on stone rang like a challenge, not to the palace, but to the rules. At her door stood 2 guards, silent, not looking away. He approached, looked at one of them. "I need to go there." The guard didn't answer, didn't step aside, but didn't interfere, simply looked to the side, as if in this house everything was already decided without words. He pushed the door, not hard. It opened. Inside was she, in the chair, in black, alone, without candles, without mirrors, without defenses. She raised her gaze, saw him, wasn't surprised, wasn't frightened, simply said, "You didn't go." He closed the door behind him, slowly, came closer. "No." "Why?" "Because it's not you who sends me there." She stood. Her entire figure, shadow. But in her eyes, fire. Not anger, not passion. Submission that looks like power. "Do you know who stands behind the door?" "Yes." "Do you know what you're violating?" "I know." "And you still came?" "I didn't come. I remained." He said this quietly. But in this quietness was more thunder than in any royal decree, and then approached, touched her hand, carefully, as if asking, "Will you allow?" She didn't answer, but didn't pull away. Behind the door was movement. Someone wanted to enter, but no one entered, because they didn't dare. Because in the palace, everyone feared her. But he didn't, and this made him the only one she could call hers. Chapter 8. She whispered his name at night, and during the day, denied. He became her body, her pain, her weapon, and her fear. Because now it wasn't she who chose, but he who held her on a chain. He remained, not as a servant, not as a lover, but as a shadow that could no longer be banished. Every night, beside her, without request, without invitation, he simply lay down, beside her, sometimes before her, sometimes waited until she fell asleep. She didn't tell him, "Come," but whispered his name in sleep, muffled, broken, as if afraid to hear it aloud. He touched her neck, shoulders, thighs, but did this not as a guest, but as one who was already here, as if this wasn't her body, but their shared one. In the morning, he disappeared, early, before dawn, as if he had never been here. She got up, washed her face, looked in the mirror, and said, "He's not mine." Servants nodded, but they knew. In the reception hall, she sat straight, coldly, evenly, as if her body didn't remember how that night it breathed in time with another. He entered, as a warrior, as silence that became voice. He didn't smile, but looked so that her fingers clenched into fists under the table. She forbade calling him by name. Officially, he didn't exist, but the entire court already knew. Everyone saw how he stood slightly closer than appropriate, how she lingered her gaze on the back of his head when he left. She whispered, "You became my weakness." He answered, "I became your mirror." And this frightened her more than everything she did to others, because before, she ruled, she chose, she touched, she removed. And now, she waited, for when he would enter, for when he would lie down, for when he would say, nothing. He wasn't passion. He became a weapon, sharp, thin, silent. He didn't threaten. He simply was nearby, while she trembled. "I'm afraid," she said once. "Of yourself?" he asked. "No, of you." "Then you still haven't understood." "What?" "That now you don't control, you belong." And in this moment she fell silent, because for the first time in her entire life, she didn't know what to say. And this silence became her most real defeat. Chapter 9. He said, "If I leave, you'll die." And she understood he was right. Because her passion became her pain, and her pain became his throne. He said this not in rage, not in impulse, not in a whisper on the pillow. He said this in the garden, in the middle of the day, in sight of servants, when she turned away from him, when she tried to pretend that she still held the situation in her hands. He simply approached from behind, said, "If I leave, you'll die." She froze. The hand with the cup froze, gaze to the ground, breathing even, but heart faltered. He didn't touch, simply stood nearby. No embraces, no sorry. The pause dragged on. Then she answered, "You speak like a curse." "No," he said, like a diagnosis. He left, without casting a glance, without leaving a scent, simply disappeared around the corner, leaving her alone with everything she tried not to acknowledge. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay alone, door open, body dry, skin cold. He didn't come, and this was more frightening than if he had struck. Because suddenly it turned out that her power was only on paper, that her strength was in his gaze, that her calm was while he was nearby. She remembered all those she had sent away, all who begged to stay, all who feared being forgotten. Now she was afraid. Not of passion, not of shame, of emptiness. In the morning she was pale, silent. Servants noticed how her hand trembled twice while she poured water for herself. He didn't come on the second day either, or the third. And then she went out on the balcony, at night, in a nightgown, without jewelry, with bare feet. And he stood below, alone, on marble, looking up. She said nothing, but her eyes burned. He didn't move, she either. "If I ask," she said, "will you return?" He answered, "No, I don't return. I remain or disappear forever." And then she understood. Everything she felt wasn't love, not desire, not passion. This was dependence, grown from silence, strengthened by fear, and now inescapable. Because he sat on the throne that she herself had built, from glances, from commands, from weakness, and the pain she once gave to others, now lived in her, with his voice, with his body, with his absence. Chapter 10. She sent him to the monastery, after 9 months, herself, silently, without farewell. But he had already managed to remain in another body, in another voice, because the child born in spring didn't know his father's name, but had his eyes. She didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't break dishes, simply opened her eyes at dawn and understood. It's over. He slept nearby, facing her, breathing evenly, without passion, without anxiety. He was no longer her fire. He became air, that which is invisible. But if it disappears, you die. She got up, put on a dress, left the room, without saying goodbye. She ordered servants to prepare horses and write one letter, one name, one path, monastery, not as exile, as salvation, for him, for her. 9 months after their first night, she exiled him from the palace, without a scene, without announcements, without a farewell gift. He didn't resist, he only looked at her, for a long time, and quietly said, "You'll be truly late, not now, but later," and left, in a gray cloak, without weapons, with the same gaze that held her on a chain for so many months. In spring, a child was born, a boy, small, silent, with dark eyes. No one knew the father's name. No one asked. Her husband was old, ill, distant. He didn't raise the question. She held the child in her arms and saw, not his lips, not his fingers, but the gaze, that very one, which once entered her bedroom and remained, not in body, inside. He no longer came, didn't write, didn't call, but she knew. He remained, in the sun's skin, in the intonation of laughter, in the pause between breath and word. And now, every time she heard this voice, still childish but already recognizable, her heart faltered. Not from fear, from memory, because from some men you don't take away the name, they leave legacy and disappear. But you no longer forget them, because they are forever in you, even if you yourself exiled them.